Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our latest Seed Wellness podcast. And this week at Seed, we are focusing on everything around our Seed Childbirth Collective, which is our panel of experts who focus on everything from preconception to beyond birth. So we're talking about fertility, pregnancy, birth, and then sort of the whole, the postnatal stage as well. And so today I am delighted to be sharing the mic with the wonderful Lizzie Gilbert, who is Seed's doula, located in Beaconsfield, Buckinghamshire. So obviously for this part of the campaign, we're focusing on the birthing part. And, I think, at Seed, what we really try to do is simplify wellness, because people would have heard the word doula, but they don't necessarily know what a doula does. There's a lot that you do, and maybe more than people may realize as well. So let's just talk about what a doula is and how you support parents through the journey to childbirth.
Amazing. So a doula is a trained companion who supports expectant families through pregnancy, labor, birth, postpartum period. And the word originally comes from the Greek, meaning to serve. And it really is in service of women and in the most vulnerable and transformative chapter of their lives. So it's a true honor and privilege to get that window into that time frame. But doulas provide emotional, physical, and informational support. We don't replace medical care and we don't make decisions for families. We rather give them the tools so that they're able to make confident decisions for themselves. And we work alongside the medical team that is supporting the parents already. I think one of the biggest differences for doulas is that continuity. So often parents will book doulas when they're around 20 to 30 weeks pregnant. And so you really get an opportunity to build a relationship and rapport for quite a few weeks, sometimes for half the pregnancy journey. And that often goes to a few weeks postpartum as well. So that just depends on the doula and the package and that sort of support that they build in. But we're supporting you from beginning to end. And I think that's at the heart of what a doula is just presence. And that safety and information really makes birth take on a new level of confidence.
Okay. So why are now I've had two kids. I didn't have a doula. I wanted to have a home birth, and unfortunately I didn't have a home birth. But I did understand, the role of a doula, but I never really understood, the intricacies of the, why doulas are so effective until I'd had a baby, and I understood the hormonal impact of having a baby. So you can say in your words, why doulas are so effective in the birthing process for women and for parents, but ultimately for women to ensure the smoothest birth possible.
Yeah. So doulas, I think, are really effective because they recognize that birth is not just a physical process. It's hugely influenced by environment and emotion and how safe one feels. So there's lots of research that's gone into this. And I suppose one of the biggest ones that help just really pinpoint how they make such a difference is what we call a harsh environment theory. So in the past, births were at home. They've moved into the hospitals for a large majority of them. And hospitals bring on a whole set of different circumstances like bright lighting and unfamiliar routines and reduced privacy and strangers. And so even when excellent clinical care is being implemented, this is a situation to make anyone feel vulnerable and really struggle with the immense, intense physical sensations. And a doula really works to buffer that environment, so that continuous presence and rapport that they've built up over the duration of the pregnancy really helps reduce distraction and fear, and it helps the woman regain her focus, and it supports her confidence, and it lets labor unfold with less interruption. The other one is that they help with pain relief. This is not because doulas remove the pain. That would be impossible, but it helps boost oxytocin, which is our hormone responsible for contractions. And when that hormone is high and our stress hormones are low, we have a better outcome usually. And this also aligns well with how a doula supports. So there's often a lot of physical touch and reassurance and eye contact. And these interventions from the doula help to support what we call the gate control theory of pain, which is that non-painful sensory inputs can reduce the brain's perception of pain. And so, yeah, there's high quality studies that just show that the improved outcomes is that continuous support from a doula. So, yeah, I think that sums up.
Yeah, and so the perception of doulas has changed. When we look back, when we were, they say, if we were to go back into, we were in villages, and they say it makes a village to raise a child, and that started from childbirth.
Absolutely.
Where you'd be surrounded by women, natural, doulas, just it was just part of giving birth, right? How has the perception, of course we moved the opposite way from that, and we went into a sterile environment, which I think is what can be tricky for women, and I know this is something that we will talk about, the impact that a more clinical environment has on women giving birth. So how do you feel that the perception of doula has changed? And how has your view shifted?
So historically, birth, as you've just mentioned, was not supposed to be something that women did alone, or that they did alone, not supposed to. It was built into the communities. Communities were supporting. And so doulas are a modern return to something that is very old. I think there has been a time where doulas were and are seen as alternative or anti-medical. And I think that perception still lingers for a lot of people. But slowly but surely, with good information, I think we are starting to see a shift. But large international studies have analyzed loads of births over many countries, and continuous labor support is associated with fewer cesarean sections and higher rates of spontaneous vaginal births, reduced use of pain medication, shorter labors, fewer negative birth experiences, and depression. And there's been no evidence of harm in any of these studies. And so it really does frame a doula as complementary and not oppositional to the medical care that is being offered. But I think for me, what has shifted and what I think has made such an important impact on my journey to become a doula is I was one of the skeptics myself. So I trained as a midwife and a nurse. And the irony is that a midwife trains to support a woman holistically. And so I think a doula can seem a little bit like they're trying to take on some of our role. But the difference was at the onset of my training, I had already been exposed to my dream model of care. And it was at a clinic that has 24-hour nursing care and an on-site theatre and neonatal stabilization units and full medical backup as needed. But what really struck me in that model was the continuity and the rapport and the deep respect for physiology, still with really excellent safety nets in place. But my reality was very, very different from this. And so it really highlighted again that maternity systems internationally aren't able to support this model of care. And that prompted me to ask, how do I support birth well when the system hasn't been set up to do this? And my answer only came years later, and it was to train as a doula. And it really did mean putting my pride aside and recognizing that doulas aren't replacing midwives. They're enabling the kind of support we wish the system could provide. And doulas really do have the ability to support medical teams and allow for holistic support to happen in a system that isn't set up for it.
And that's a very interesting point you raised.
Independently.
Yeah. So the differences between a midwife and a doula, I think that's probably something that people, even you were confused by the differences. So what sets you apart?
Hello.
Hi. We lost
It
each other.
froze.
It froze. Okay.
At least we got to the end of question 4,
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going.
and it
I'll
was
cut.
just a
I'll cut
comment.
this bit out. So,
Perfect.
okay. So, okay. 3, 2. I don't know why it's freezing. It's really weird.
I don't know. We have like my husband literally does video calls the whole day, and he's not even home today. But like he does them from 8 till 5 every single day in this house. So I
Anyway,
don't understand. But mine's saying full signal, so maybe it just really doesn't like us. Maybe we're the combination. It's like, eh.
don't know. Anyway, okay. My
Okay.
dog is going to come
Whew.
bounding in. We're going to have to stop again when the dog comes bounding in, but let's keep
Okay.
going. Okay.
We got this.
3. We got this. 3, 2, 1. So, what role does a doula play in high tech hospital births that sets it apart from a midwife as well?
Yeah, so I think the big part is that hospital environments really are familiar to doulas. We've supported so many families in that sort of environment. And it's a key role of that continuity and presence. And I think just being familiar with the equipment and the terminology and the situations that play out in a hospital help us support the parents feel less intimidated, just because it is our everyday language. I think it allows us to bring a sense of calm to however the situation is playing out. And yeah, it just means that we're able to explain complex information more simply and stay grounded when plans change. Um, and the role essentially stays the same. It is that continuity and presence and support and emotional reassurance, and that's not ever going to change, whichever birth environment the family chooses or ends up having to need.
So,
Yeah.
in talking about that, there are, are you able to assist parents at home, as an example?
Absolutely. So we go wherever we're needed. That's the joy of our job as well, is it takes us to anywhere. But home environments, absolutely. I think we've often stepped into your home during your pregnancy. So long before labor even starts, we've had that window into your home, and we get to see your space and your preferences and how you function as a family. So that really does give us deep insight in how to support you best at home or in hospital. And at home, it might just be more practical sort of steps and not getting involved. We never get involved in medical decisions, but it will be position changes and helping the birth pools stay at the right temperature, or making tea for the family that's around, or simply just sitting quietly and offering reassurance. We adapt the care that we need to provide for whatever it is that you're needing in that moment. So yeah, there's lots of home care for pre-birth, for birth, and then for post-birth as well. We step into your home often.
Yeah, and we're talking about different personalities as well, aren't we? Because that just
Absolutely.
varies from person to person, and especially for women,
Yeah.
doesn't get more emotional. She doesn't get more sensitive, emotional than
Yeah.
that.
No.
Wow.
Biggest emotional adjustments in your life, I think.
So obviously when things are going well, it's great. Sometimes things, might be- they the outcome, the journey can be rocky, can be challenging, can be long.
Absolutely. It can.
So how do you deal with that with mom who's maybe been in labor for a long time, or challenges arise? How can you support her through those challenges?
So I think one of the biggest things is that education is a big part. For me, I personally believe that education is a massive part of preparing the woman and the family to understand that birth doesn't take on one set path. There are many outcomes that we can expect. And I think that reassurance and managing expectations long before labor starts is so important, to just give them the confidence when things don't seem to go according to plan. Um, the second part is, again, a doula's role remains unchanged in whether a labor is long or short, whether it is complex, whether it takes on the path that we intended or didn't, we are still there to provide reassurance. That rapport and that confidence is such an integral part of what we do, and how we're able to adapt to what the woman needs. It might mean that care stays the same. They might need just quiet reassurance in that moment. They might need direct eye contact, and this is when you need to make a decision. They might need to just be reminded of the groundwork we've covered in the antenatal period, and just a gentle prod on how do they implement it, and how do they ask the medical team the questions that they need to gain that confidence and make a good informed decision for themselves and for
So
their
you're
baby.
talking about them advocating for themselves, really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's such a key thing as well. And I think women, and I did a hypnobirthing course many years ago, and it was really interesting to hear, and I think about my own experience as well, when you are feeling that vulnerable and you are just emotionally, and you don't know what to expect, because especially if it's your first,
Yeah.
the unpredictability of it is really something that we never really have to deal with in any other scenario. It's a really
No. Yeah.
unique scenario. So how do partners typically respond to having a doula present?
So partners, I'd say that universally they respond really well. There's relief. That's probably the biggest way to sum it up. And I think there's also a misconception that doulas replace partners, but the opposite is true. I think that it's such a complementary role for a doula to be supporting the family, and when it's seen that way, it's truly transformational. So it really is giving them the information in the antenatal period as well. I always would prefer both expectant parents to be present for education. I think that just gives them a groundwork and framework to structure their conversations and manage their expectations, and just create empathy for both sides of the party, because it is a chapter that starts afresh for both of them, not just one person. So it's giving them practical tools and just helping them become confident. The other part that I've realized is just watching somebody you love labor is so incredibly hard, especially when you can't share that physical burden. It is your partner's burden to share or alone. And partners, I think, in my experience, have always felt very isolated and frightened by that, because it's so scary. But just, I think having a doula present really helps manage that panic. They feel like they're not carrying that responsibility alone. And I just really make a lot of effort to check in on the partner as well, all through birth, of like, are they coping? Have they eaten something? How are they managing emotionally? Is there something they want to be involved in or not involved in? Like, for example, cutting the cord or seeing their baby actually being born, or do they have questions? So I really think that doula's presence doesn't replace the partner's role, but rather just strengthens it.
I think that is such a valid point, because when you think about doulas, you think about women, you think about them
Yeah,
supporting the woman giving birth. And actually,
absolutely.
I always did feel sorry for my partner, thinking he's doing what he can, but he doesn't really
Yeah,
know. And you hear this a lot, friends and just the wider people, your communities of people saying, well, he didn't really know what to do, or, it's
yeah.
very hard. You're kind of on the
It's
outside,
really
kind of
hard.
looking in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
there for him too, which I think is really
I am.
nice.
Yeah,
I think one thing that I really also learned through my journey of learning about, the childbirth and the hypnobirthing was, the impact of hormones on women, and how that, it has such a big influence on the outcome of the experience, the whole
yeah,
journey. And
yeah,
like
for
you were talking
sure.
about earlier, cortisol, if people are stressed, and environments where they feel stressed, and actually, that can stop a birth in its tracks. The body just switches
Mm.
off. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because I think this is really, and I know you're talking about this as part of the education that you provide, but I think this is really, really fundamental.
Um, yeah, so stress hormones are a big impact in stalling birth. And just trying to manage those, it can be really tricky, because sometimes there's a level of stress that is really hard to diminish. But all of the things we really love to do to be cozy and comfortable, even when we're not pregnant, like putting on our fairy lights or dim lights in the house, or lighting a candle, or putting on music and eating chocolates. Those are all sort of ways that we're boosting our own oxytocin. And so I often just try and remind parents in their pregnancy of just the simple ways that we don't really give much thought to, but as much as you can implement these throughout labor, you're just trying to keep minimizing the release of stress. It's sometimes not a practical way, because you might have a situation where your birth is taking an unexpected turn, and it's really natural that your stress hormones are going to peak and your body's trying to keep you safe. It's that whole mammal sort of concept where a lion's not going to go and give birth in the middle of a battlefield. They're going to go off to a quiet little corner. And you do the same. You will want to keep your baby safe, and pregnancy or labor will stop or halt. But it's just that reminder of where you can in the environment that you are needing to birth in, trying to just pick up on the key little things that you can do: eating your favorite food, playing some music, dimming the lights, minimizing interruptions, having people that you trust around you. Those are all sorts of ways that we can reduce some of the stress and make it an environment that is optimal for birth to continue physiologically.
Yeah, and I think this is so important. I think when women understand that kind of the basic, fundamentals of hormone impact and cortisol impact, I think that can really be a game changer, in how they set themselves up with or without, doula support. So is there anything else that you'd like to say or share before we wrap up?
I think there's a couple of things that I would probably just summarize that I wish people understood about birth. And there's a couple of things. I think I've probably could summarize it to 3 or 4. But for one is that your experience of birth really matters. Even years later, you'll often hear people talking about their birth years and years later, and they can recall it so vividly. It is psychological and emotional and relational, and just that feeling safe and informed and supported really does have lasting effects on confidence and mental health and the transition into parenthood. And so the point is just information, education, managing expectations are so important. And even if you weren't to have a doula, I would just encourage expectant parents to just be well informed. It really does change so much. The second is that I'm so deeply grateful for science and that it saves lives, but birth is not an illness, and it is a state of wellness. And when physiology is understood and supported, the body really is capable of such incredible things. And birth in itself is an absolute miracle. And just understanding how it all fits together is incredible and should give us such confidence in our bodies. The third is something I'm deeply passionate about, is education. But preparation isn't about control. And I think it's really important that people understand that, because in our day and age, we're all for talking about a birth plan, and it almost seems that it becomes this rigid set of rules that people want to follow. But it's more about understanding your options and being able to trust your body and knowing that you're supported in whichever way birth seems to go. And I suppose one of the big ones is that every action has a consequence. So I think people deserve to understand the risks and the benefits and the alternatives. And maybe controversially, but I would say without being sugar-coated. I feel like we want the options, but we often don't want to understand the cause and effect. And in my birth preparation classes and the lead up to supporting a family, that's something I'm really passionate about. They need to understand that everything has a cause and effect. Nothing comes without a risk. And that just when families are informed they can meet birth with clarity rather than fear. So those are probably the big things that Lizzie Gilbert at Conception is really passionate about. And I just really wish that more people understood those parts.
Well, you're clearly very passionate about it. It's clearly your calling. You're meant to be doing what you're doing.
Yay.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing, that
Thank you
with
so
us,
much
your
for having
expertise,
me.
your insights, your
Thank you.
experiences. And if people want to find you, they can find you obviously on the Seed Wellness website,
Absolutely.
www.seedwellness.co.uk/Elizabeth Gilbert, as you're known, Lizzie or Elizabeth. And if people want to find you outside that, how can they find you, your own website and your own Instagram page?
So my website is www.conception.co.uk. And it's always my one that I forget, but I think my Instagram handle is Conception Collective.
Nice.
So that is what it is. But all the details are on my website as well.
Fantastic. And obviously people can find you on our website
Yeah,
to find their way to
that's
your
amazing.
website if they need to. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much again for your
Thank you
time.
so much for
And for
having
anybody
me.
who has any more generic questions around this whole topic of not just birth, but anything and everything around the journey of from preconception to beyond birth, you are welcome to email into info@seedwellness.co.uk, and we will filter your inquiry out to the appropriate practitioner. So thank you again, Lizzie. Thank you to those joining us, and we will see you soon.